Have you ever wondered why some men seem to effortlessly command respect and admiration from women, while others struggle to gain even a fraction of that attention? The answer lies not in superficial charm or manipulation, but in a deeper understanding of human nature and the delicate balance of power in relationships. Many men unknowingly make small but critical mistakes that tip this balance in favor of women, inflating their egos while diminishing their own value. But what if you could reverse that? What if, instead of chasing after validation, you became the man that women are irresistibly drawn to? This isn't about games or deception. It's about reclaiming your confidence, setting boundaries, and understanding the psychology that governs attraction. When you shift your focus inward, building the best version of yourself, everything around you changes, including how you're perceived by the women in your life. In this guide, we'll explore 5 common mistakes that men make, and more importantly, how to avoid them. Master these principles, and you'll find yourself in a position of quiet strength, where respect, admiration, and attraction naturally flow towards you. Ready to learn the secrets? Let's dive in. Mistake 1. Over-pampering and losing yourself. One of the most common missteps men make in relationships is over-pampering their partner to the point where their own needs and identity take a back seat. It's natural to want to make someone happy, but when you constantly prioritize her desires without regard for your own boundaries or well-being, you unknowingly hand over your power. This leads to an unhealthy dynamic where the balance of respect and mutual care begins to crumble. Imagine this scenario. She mentions a luxurious handbag she has her eye on. "It's beautiful," she says, "but it's a bit expensive." You, eager to please, immediately respond, "If you want it, I'll buy it for you." You may think you're being thoughtful and generous, but in reality, you're sending a clear message. Her wants come first, even if it costs you. Over time, this dynamic encourages an unspoken expectation that you will always give in, and she may start taking your gestures for granted. Now, picture a different response. Instead of immediately offering to buy the bag, you gently say, "It's nice, but you should consider if it's worth it." Responsible spending is important. With this answer, you're setting a boundary. You're showing her that while her desires matter, your practical mindset and self-respect matter too. This subtle shift in how you respond changes the entire dynamic. Suddenly, you're not just someone who bends to her every whim. You become a man with principles, someone who thinks things through before acting. Women, whether consciously or subconsciously, are drawn to men who value themselves and stand by their beliefs. When you pamper her excessively without expecting anything in return, you inflate her ego and deflate your own. She may begin to see you as someone easily manipulated, a nice guy who will do anything to keep her happy, but at the expense of his own integrity. And while that might seem like a short-term way to win affection, in the long run, it chips away at your self-worth and her respect for you. The key to maintaining balance in any relationship is setting boundaries and keeping a healthy amount of self-respect intact. Treating her with kindness is essential, but never at the cost of your own dignity or values. The moment you stop catering to her every desire is the moment she starts seeing you differently. She'll recognize that your attention is something she must earn, not something that comes freely just because of her appearance or charm. As the saying goes, people rarely appreciate what comes too easily. By holding back and giving only when it feels right, when there's mutual respect and understanding, you create a sense of value around yourself. You become someone worth working for, someone whose attention isn't granted simply because it's expected. She'll start to view you as a prize, someone who offers something more substantial than just material gifts or surface-level affection. In essence, this shift won't diminish your value. It will elevate it. By being thoughtful in your actions and selective in your generosity, you maintain your sense of self and create a dynamic where both partners respect each other's needs. The result? A more balanced, fulfilling relationship where mutual appreciation takes the place of unbalanced expectations. When you stop over-pampering, you not only reclaim your own power, but you also allow space for her to invest in the relationship in meaningful ways. It's in this space, this balance, that real connection and respect can grow. So, the next time you find yourself on the verge of giving in too easily, take a step back, breathe, and remember, you are as important in this relationship as she is. Mistake 2, the fear of losing her. The fear of losing someone can be overwhelming, especially when you're deeply invested in the relationship. But here's the paradox. The more you fear losing her, the more you push her away. This fear manifests in small but destructive ways, constantly checking your phone for her messages, overanalyzing her every move, and reshaping your life to revolve around her. It's a slow but steady erosion of your confidence and independence. In trying to keep her close, you end up suffocating not just her, but also yourself. Let's walk through a familiar scenario. You've just started dating someone and everything feels perfect. You're infatuated, excited, and eager to be with her all the time. You find yourself checking your phone every few minutes, waiting for her next text. If she doesn't reply right away, your mind spirals. Is she losing interest? Did I do something wrong? You replay every conversation, every interaction, searching for clues. This constant anxiety turns your thoughts into a maze of self-doubt. You begin organizing your day around her. Your work, hobbies, and even time with friends start to fade to the background because all you can think about is her. You've placed her at the center of your universe, and without even realizing it, you've made her the one holding all the power. She becomes your source of validation, and with that, the dynamic shifts. You've moved from being a confident individual to someone dependent on her approval. But here's the truth. No one is attracted to someone who's constantly afraid. Fear radiates insecurity, and insecurity is the quickest way to lose someone's respect. When you act out of fear, you start making irrational decisions, overcompensating by being too available, overly accommodating, or excessively apologetic. These actions send a clear message. You're afraid of being alone, and she becomes your safety net. So how do you break free from this trap? First, acknowledge the fear. It's okay to feel anxious about someone you care about. It means you're human, but it's how you respond to that fear that determines the outcome. One of the best ways to combat this anxiety is to take a step back and breathe. Instead of letting fear dictate your actions, allow yourself a moment to reflect on what's happening inside you. Try this simple exercise. Close your eyes and focus on your breath. Inhale deeply for 4 seconds, hold it for another 4, and then exhale slowly. Repeat this for a few minutes until you feel more centered. As you calm down, ask yourself, why am I so afraid? Is it really about her, or is it something deeper within me? Often the fear of losing someone is tied to a deeper fear of not being enough, of not being loved, or of being left behind. Recognizing this is the first step toward breaking the cycle. Now, shift your focus away from her and back onto yourself. Instead of worrying about every text or interaction, start investing in the things that truly matter to you, your passions, your career, your friendships. When you recenter your life around your own growth and happiness, something remarkable happens. You stop seeking validation from her and start finding it within yourself. This newfound confidence radiates outward, and suddenly you become more attractive not just to her, but to everyone around you. There's a powerful psychological principle called the scarcity effect, which states that people are more attracted to things that are not always readily available. When you're always at her beck and call, you become predictable, easy to read, and perhaps even taken for granted. But when you create a little distance by focusing on your own life, by being unavailable at times, you create mystery. She starts wondering about you, about your life, and suddenly you're no longer the one chasing her attention. She's the one chasing yours. This isn't about playing games. It's about reclaiming your own space and value. When you stop making her the center of your world, you regain the balance of power in the relationship. Instead of living in constant fear of losing her, you start living for yourself. And ironically, it's in this state of independence and confidence that you become far more appealing. She'll start noticing that you're not the anxious, overly attached guy she once knew. You've become someone who has his own life, his own passions, and his own sense of self-worth. The transformation is subtle, but powerful. By focusing on your own growth and happiness, you shift the dynamic entirely. You are no longer controlled by fear or the need for validation. Instead, you stand tall in your own confidence, attracting her and others by simply being the best version of yourself. The fear of losing her fades because you realize that your worth is not defined by whether she stays or goes. It's defined by you. In the end, the strongest relationships are built on mutual respect, not dependency. So take a deep breath, focus on what makes you happy, and let go of the fear. The right person will recognize your value, and you won't have to sacrifice your self-worth to keep them close. Mistake 3, not knowing how to say no. There is a subtle but powerful truth in relationships. Knowing how to say no can be one of the most attractive qualities a person can possess. It signals confidence, boundaries, and self-respect, qualities that draw people in and command respect. Yet many men fall into the trap of constantly saying yes, believing that by always being agreeable, they will win favor. In reality, the opposite often happens. When you never say no, you risk becoming predictable, uninteresting, and worse, someone who can be easily manipulated. Let's break this down with a common situation. Imagine a woman, confident and used to attention, asks for your help with something trivial, perhaps picking up a wallet she dropped. Most men, eager to please, might instantly jump in saying, "Of course, let me help you." To the woman, this response is expected, ordinary. There's no challenge, no spark, because she knows that she can ask and you will immediately comply. Now, let's flip the scenario. When she asks for help, you calmly respond, "Sorry, I'm a bit busy. You can manage on your own." Everything changes. Instead of being another person eager to cater to her whims, you've disrupted the pattern. For a moment, she's thrown off. In her mind, a quiet question arises. Why didn't he help me? Have I lost my charm? That small no challenges her perception, creating an air of mystery around you. You are no longer just another man willing to do anything to please her. You've become a puzzle, someone she has to figure out. Saying no is not about being rude or difficult. It's about showing that you have standards, that your time and energy are valuable. It's about communicating that you won't compromise your own needs or priorities just to gain approval. And when you consistently demonstrate this kind of self-assurance, you become someone worth chasing, someone who is not so easily won over. Think about the psychology behind this. Beautiful women, especially those who are used to constant praise and attention, rarely face rejection. They are often placed on a pedestal, admired from all angles. In this environment, a man who says no stands out like a beacon of intrigue. He becomes the exception, the one who isn't afraid to hold back when it's necessary. This dynamic subtly shifts the power in the relationship. By asserting your boundaries, you show her that she cannot take your attention for granted, that she must earn it. And here's the beautiful part. Saying no when appropriate actually enhances the quality of your interactions. Instead of becoming someone who constantly says yes and offers everything without question, you become someone whose attention is special. She'll start to value your time, your opinions, and your company more because they are not given freely without consideration. You've created scarcity around your presence, and scarcity breeds desire. Let's take a moment to look deeper into this concept of scarcity. Human nature tends to place more value on things that are not always accessible. When something is rare or slightly out of reach, it becomes more desirable. This principle applies not just to material goods, but also to relationships. If you are always available, always saying yes, you become easy to predict, and predictability can lead to complacency in the relationship. On the other hand, when you maintain a degree of independence, by sometimes saying no, by not always being available, you create space for curiosity. She begins to wonder about you, to seek out your attention because it is not constantly given. But it's important to understand that saying no isn't about playing hard to get. It's about genuinely protecting your time, energy, and self-worth. It's about having the confidence to know when to set boundaries and when to assert yourself in a way that is healthy for both you and her. When you say no, you're not just rejecting a request. You're affirming that you have your own values and priorities and that you won't bend those for anyone. This is where many men falter. They believe that saying no will make them seem unkind or uninterested, but the truth is that saying no at the right moments shows strength. It tells her that you are not a pushover, that you are someone who respects himself enough to put his own needs first when necessary. And paradoxically, this makes you more attractive, not less. Here's another example. Perhaps she invites you to an event, but you already have other plans or need time for yourself. Instead of canceling your plans or rearranging your schedule, you politely decline. You might say, "That sounds fun, but I've already committed to something else." This response communicates that you have a life outside of her, that you are not going to drop everything just to be with her. It shows that your time is precious and that you are someone who values himself. Over time, as you practice this balance of giving and holding back, you'll notice a shift in how she interacts with you. She will start to appreciate the times when you do say yes more, because they are no longer expected, they are earned. Your no becomes a reminder that you are not just someone who exists to please her, but someone who has his own needs, desires, and boundaries. In the end, learning to say no is one of the most powerful tools you can have in any relationship. It is a reflection of your self-respect and your confidence. It sets the tone for a relationship where both partners are valued and respected, not because one person is constantly giving in, but because there is a mutual understanding of each other's worth. So the next time you find yourself in a situation where you're tempted to say yes just to make her happy, take a moment, ask yourself, is this what I really want? Am I saying yes because I feel pressured or because it aligns with my own values? If the answer is no, then don't be afraid to say it. You'll be surprised at how much stronger and more attractive you become when you learn to hold your ground. Mistake 4, losing your ground out of need. One of the most devastating mistakes men make in relationships is surrendering their values and identity because of the fear of losing their partner. It's a subtle trap, one that begins with good intentions, wanting to make her happy, keep the peace, or prove your love. But over time, this need to please starts eroding your own sense of self, and with it, your strength, your individuality, and even her respect for you fade. When you abandon your stance just to maintain the relationship, you slowly lose control over both the relationship and yourself. Imagine this common scenario. You're in a serious relationship, and your partner begins expressing dissatisfaction. "You don't love me enough," she says. "You need to change your lifestyle and job if you really care about me." It's a direct challenge to your identity, your career, and your choices. The man who's fearful of losing her may feel the pressure to immediately give in. "You're right," he might say. "I'll quit my job and change everything just to keep you happy." He believes that by making these sacrifices, he's showing commitment. But in reality, he's losing something far more valuable, his own integrity. Now, let's explore the alternative. In this same scenario, instead of rushing to change, imagine you calmly respond, "I love you, but my job and lifestyle are a part of who I am. I can't change that." In this moment, you're standing firm in your values. You're not dismissing her concerns, but you're also not abandoning who you are to meet unreasonable demands. What happens next is crucial. Instead of weakening your position, you've actually strengthened it. By holding your ground, you show her that while you care deeply for her, you also respect yourself enough to honor your own path. This shift in the dynamic is where many men fall short. They mistakenly believe that in order to maintain a relationship, they need to be constantly adapting, constantly bending to their partner's wishes. But what happens when you give up too much of yourself? The answer is that you begin to lose your own sense of identity. And without that identity, you lose the core of what made you attractive in the first place. She may not immediately realize it, but as you start to reshape your life to fit her desires, you become less of the person she was initially drawn to. And that's when the real distance begins. Think of it this way. When you constantly give in, you create a dynamic where she holds all the power, and over time, her respect for you diminishes. Respect is the cornerstone of any healthy relationship, and once it's lost, it's difficult to regain. But when you stand your ground, when you stay true to who you are, you create a space for mutual respect. She might not like hearing that you won't change for her, but deep down, she will respect you for it. And that respect is the foundation upon which a real, lasting connection is built. Here's the psychology behind it. The more you give up to please someone, the more you signal that you are dependent on their approval. This creates a dynamic where your partner feels she can control the relationship and, by extension, control you. But when you refuse to bend on the things that matter most to you, you communicate strength, independence, and self-respect. These qualities are incredibly attractive because they show that you're not afraid to stand alone if necessary. You're not afraid of losing her because your identity doesn't rely solely on the relationship. Let's look at another example. Say your partner is upset that you spend time with friends or engage in hobbies she doesn't enjoy. She begins to demand that you give up these activities in favor of spending more time with her. The man who fears losing her might say, "Okay, I'll stop hanging out with my friends. I'll quit that hobby." He thinks this sacrifice will strengthen the relationship, but in reality, it sets the stage for resentment, both from her and from himself. Over time, he becomes bitter for giving up the things he loves, and she becomes less attracted to someone who no longer has passions or a life outside of her. Now imagine the man who responds differently. He listens to her concerns, but responds with confidence. "I understand how you feel, but my friends and hobbies are important to me. I can't give them up." This response doesn't dismiss her feelings, but it also doesn't betray his own. By staying true to his values, he shows that while he loves her, he is not willing to lose himself in the process. And this creates a much healthier dynamic, one where both partners can have their own lives, interests, and identities, rather than one person subsuming the other. At its core, standing your ground is about recognizing your own worth and refusing to let fear dictate your actions. When you act out of fear, whether it's fear of losing her, fear of conflict, or fear of being alone, you end up sacrificing pieces of yourself. And with each sacrifice, you become weaker in the relationship. But when you act from a place of strength, when you hold firm in your beliefs and refuse to compromise on your core values, you become someone she can't help but respect. Here's the ultimate truth. Real love doesn't require you to change who you are. It asks you to grow, yes, but it doesn't demand that you sacrifice your essence. When you stand firm in your values, you create space for both partners to be their best selves. And in that space, true connection, respect, and love can flourish. In the end, maintaining your stance isn't about being stubborn or inflexible. It's about knowing who you are, what you stand for, and refusing to lose that sense of self just to keep someone else happy. Relationships built on this foundation are stronger, healthier, and far more fulfilling than those based on constant compromise and fear of loss. So, the next time you feel the pressure to give in, remember, it's not just about keeping the peace, it's about keeping yourself whole. Mistake 5, not letting go when it's time. One of the hardest truths to accept in any relationship is that sometimes walking away is the best decision you can make. Holding on to someone with an inflated ego or staying in a relationship where respect has been lost doesn't just damage your emotional health, it strips away your self-worth piece by piece. And yet, many men find themselves stuck, unable to let go because they've convinced themselves that the relationship is worth saving, or worse, that they can't survive without her. But here's the truth. The moment you realize a relationship is no longer serving you, letting go becomes an act of strength, not weakness. Imagine this scenario. You've been with someone for a while and things started great, but over time, her ego grew. She's become controlling, critical, and distant. She makes you feel small, as if no matter what you do, it's never enough. Maybe she's begun to disrespect your boundaries, constantly demanding more while giving less in return. You keep hoping things will improve, that if you try harder or change a little more, things will go back to how they were. But deep down, you know that the balance is gone. You're holding on to a version of her that no longer exists. This is the moment where many men falter. They cling to the hope that they can change her, that somehow their love will be enough to fix things. But the harsh reality is that you can't change someone else, especially someone who doesn't see the need for change in themselves. What you can change, however, is how you respond to the situation. And sometimes the most powerful response is to walk away. Letting go isn't about giving up. It's about recognizing that staying in a toxic relationship will only pull you further into emotional quicksand. When someone consistently inflates their ego at your expense, belittling you, taking you for granted, or making you feel less than, you have to ask yourself, what am I really holding on to? Is it love or is it fear? Fear of being alone, fear of starting over, or fear of losing what was once good? But holding on to a toxic relationship for fear of being alone will only drain you of your energy and self-esteem. Walking away is an act of self-preservation, and more importantly, self-respect. By choosing to leave, you are not just protecting yourself from further harm, you are sending a powerful message to her and to yourself. You will not tolerate disrespect, control, or manipulation. You value yourself too much to stay in a relationship where your worth is constantly undermined. It's in these moments of letting go that the greatest shifts happen. When you walk away from someone who has taken advantage of your kindness, disrespected your boundaries, or inflated their ego at your expense, you force them to confront a harsh reality. They are no longer in control. Their inflated sense of power begins to crumble as they realize that they have lost something valuable: your respect, your love, and your presence. This doesn't mean walking away is easy. It's painful, and it often feels like a leap into the unknown. But consider this. By staying in a toxic relationship, you're sacrificing your own happiness and personal growth for the sake of someone who doesn't truly value you. In the long run, staying will cost you far more than leaving ever will. The act of letting go opens up space in your life for something healthier, for someone who respects you, and for a future where you can be your true self without compromise. Letting go also forces the other person to face their behavior. They may not have realized how much they've disrespected you, or perhaps they did and didn't care. But by removing yourself from the situation, you force them to reflect on their actions. This may lead to a moment of vulnerability for them, a realization that they pushed you away by inflating their ego and diminishing your value. They might even regret their behavior and come back seeking reconciliation. However, whether or not that happens, the key is this. Walking away is about reclaiming your power and your worth. It's not about teaching them a lesson. It's about protecting yourself. Remember this. No one is worth losing yourself over. A relationship should be a partnership where both individuals respect and uplift each other. When it becomes a battle for control or an ego trip for one person, it's no longer a relationship. It's a power struggle. And in any power struggle, someone is always left feeling smaller, less important, and less valued. Don't let that be you. The act of letting go also requires a shift in perspective. Instead of viewing it as a loss, see it as a necessary step toward growth and freedom. You're freeing yourself from the emotional chains that have kept you stuck in a cycle of dissatisfaction and disrespect. You're creating space for new opportunities, new connections, and most importantly, for a deeper relationship with yourself. In the end, walking away from someone with an inflated ego isn't just about ending a toxic relationship. It's about reclaiming your own narrative. You get to decide how you're treated, how much you're willing to give, and where your boundaries lie. Letting go is the ultimate act of self-love. It says, I deserve better, and I'm not afraid to walk away to find it. So when the time comes and you realize that staying is no longer an option, don't be afraid to take that step. It may feel like a loss at first, but in truth, you're gaining something far more valuable: your freedom, your dignity, and the power to write your own story. And that, above all else, is worth more than holding on to someone who no longer deserves you. Conclusion: reclaiming your power and worth. In the journey of relationships, the most profound realization you can come to is that true power does not lie in controlling others or bending to their will. It lies in controlling yourself, your emotions, your actions, and most importantly, your sense of self-worth. The mistakes we've explored, from over-pampering to fearing loss, from failing to say no to losing your stance and struggling to let go, all stem from one fundamental truth. When you put someone else's validation above your own, you lose sight of the most important relationship you'll ever have, the one with yourself. At the heart of every healthy relationship is respect, both for your partner and crucially for yourself. When you stand firm in your values, when you set boundaries, And when you refuse to compromise your integrity, you are not just asserting your place in the relationship, you are building a foundation of mutual respect. And respect, once established, naturally gives rise to attraction, admiration, and a deeper, more fulfilling connection. But what happens when you lose this respect? When you allow fear, fear of losing her, fear of conflict, fear of being alone, to guide your actions, you give up pieces of yourself. You become someone who is easily molded, someone who exists only in response to another's desires. And slowly but surely, you lose the very thing that makes you attractive, your individuality, your strength, and your sense of self. Reclaiming your power starts with a shift in perspective. It's not about manipulating others to get what you want, nor is it about playing games. It's about focusing inward on becoming the best version of yourself. When you stop seeking validation from the outside world and start building your confidence from within, everything around you changes. You no longer feel the need to chase approval because you understand that your worth is inherent. It's not something that can be given or taken away by anyone else. This journey isn't easy. It requires letting go of old patterns, unlearning habits that have kept you stuck in a cycle of insecurity and fear. It requires the courage to walk away from relationships that no longer serve you, and the strength to stand firm in your boundaries even when it's difficult. But the reward is immeasurable. A life filled with confidence, respect, and love that comes from a place of authenticity, not desperation. The power to make her beg for you doesn't come from tricks or tactics. It comes from your own growth. When you become someone who respects himself, who knows his worth, and who isn't afraid to walk away from anything that undermines that worth, you naturally become someone who others are drawn to. The energy you exude, one of confidence, self-assuredness, and quiet strength, creates an undeniable pull. Think back to the mistakes we've covered. Each one can be traced back to a loss of self-respect or a fear of being alone. But when you reclaim your power, when you say no when it's necessary, when you stop over-pampering, when you refuse to let fear dictate your actions, and when you walk away from what no longer serves you, you are no longer operating from a place of scarcity. You are living from a place of abundance, knowing that you are enough, with or without her. This isn't about ego or arrogance. It's about understanding that you are the prize. It's about recognizing that love and respect are earned through mutual appreciation and shared values, not through manipulation or overcompensation. When you shift your focus away from trying to control the relationship and toward becoming the best version of yourself, the dynamic changes. She will no longer see you as someone to take for granted, but as someone worth fighting for. In the end, the art of reclaiming your power isn't about winning her over. It's about winning yourself back. It's about building a life that you're proud of, a life filled with purpose, growth, and self-respect. And when you do this, the right person will naturally gravitate toward you, not because you've played your cards right, but because you've become someone who is whole, confident, and undeniably worthy of respect and love. So remember, never sacrifice your sense of self for the sake of a relationship. Never let fear drive your actions or dictate your worth. And most importantly, never forget that the most powerful love you can cultivate is the one you have for yourself. In that love lies the strength to attract, the wisdom to set boundaries, and the courage to walk away when necessary. That is where true power begins, and where a fulfilling, balanced relationship can truly flourish.